Wait a minute. What do I have to click on?
I know, but we are sharing it. It is being shared. You won't see the text right now because I'm setting up YouTube, but you'll see it in a minute.
Okay.
You'll see it in 1 minute.
I have the text too. So, by the way, what Perek and
Chapter 7,
also,
Perek Zion. We're going back over the different creatures in we're going back over the different creatures in the context of the different commentators. So if you remember the first creature, Kadmesa, the first creature, which is up here, Ka'arye was like a lion, had the wings of an eagle until its wings were plus and was taken from the earth. When the tilas min arav al raglain, and it stood on its feet, ke'enos shakimas, was stood on its feet, no more wings, no more flying. Levav enos yavle, and the heart of a man was given to it. Now you should know there are 4 terms for man in the Torah, for the human being: Adam, man; Ish, Adam, Ish; Enosh, and Gever. And Enosh is the third from the bottom. It is the third weakest. In other words, Adam is strongest, Ish is less so, Enosh less so, Gever less so. So this is the first creature, the lion. So we know that the lion was the Babylonian symbol. And we talked already why it's coming from the Yam, why it's coming from the sea. And so everyone agrees that the lion is Bavel, is Nebuchadnezzar, because and the idea of the basic idea of the eagle is that the Babylonian Empire expanded very quickly, as we explained. And the idea that it was given a human human heart means to say that the Babylonians would no longer seek to conquer the world, but just be an ordinary nation. That is the basic commentary we started with. Now we are going to work our way through several hundred years, and we're going to begin with the Middle Ages, and we're going to take a look. We're going to look at the first creature.
so this is Perek Zion?
Yes, Perek Zion, Pasuk Dalet.
Oh, okay. So I'm with you.
And Rashi and the Reb Saadia Gaon and so on generally agree in this regard. Okay. Now. So most of the commentators see this as Bavel. Now, we are going to move from here to Abarvanel, who has a lot to say on the book of Daniel. You all know who Don Yitzchak Abarvanel was. Yes. Former minister of the Treasury, both to Spain and Portugal, refused to convert, was therefore expelled, ended up in Venice, wrote a tremendous amount on pretty much the whole Tanakh. And here we come to his interpretation his interpretation of the creatures. So he says,
Well, it's important here to mention that we talk again about the Chalom.
right? Yes, that it's a dream. It's a prophetic dream.
Yeah, but it happened before, and I think they're all related to Yosef.
At some level.
Yeah, I think the one that wrote the book used it. This was his version. He wrote a commentary. He basically is writing a commentary on quite a few hundred years of what's happening in the Middle East with Babel, and then he also obviously he deals with Paras, right?
Yes, Paras is next.
Yeah.
Okay, so Abarbanel makes an interesting point that
What does he say?
He points that even though later Rome becomes the mighty beast, at the times of Nebuchadnezzar destroys the temple, either 586, 422 BC. Rome already existed, and Abarbanel quotes that Rome sent a tribute, a submission, a gift to Nebuchadnezzar to show they were submitting to him, because when he destroyed Jerusalem, they were afraid he was coming to Italy next. That's how powerful he was.
That's what Abarbanel says.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting.
But behind it all, it's interesting. It's a retelling of different stories, but they all have exactly the same message. At the end, the only one that solves the problem is Daniel or his friends. In other words, the Jewish God.
But over here, this
controls.
dream is entirely Daniel's dream, which changed. By the way, something that I talked about this last week. Something very fundamental changes here. Before, he's interpreting the dreams of the kings. Now Daniel is having his own dreams.
Well, here we're talking about Melech Bavel.
Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel.
בשנת חדה מלך בבל, דניאל חלם.
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay. I missed it.
No, it's a big. We talked about this extensively last week. This is a big deal because now Daniel is having his own visions, as if it were. He's not interpreting other people's visions; he's having his own.
Must have been catching.
No, because Daniel grew, and at this point, Hashem wants to show him the future of the Jewish people. Now, so now we're going to look at the Malbim, who wrote in the middle of the 19th century. It's always very, very interesting.
When does he live?
He lived in Romania, I believe. He passed away in the 1870s. He lived in the first half of the 19th century.
I wonder what his take on it is then.
It's actually these books were all written in the 1860s, 1870s.
I mean, how can you miss Yosef and Paro, וארבע חיות גדולות עולות מן הים, שונות זו מזו.
Yeah, that's what we read. We read just Yosef. You can read the piece over. We read the whole piece over last week. We're now looking at it more in depth. But go ahead and read it.
Okay, but you said that we are reading it now, right?
We're a second time.
Oh, okay.
We're going into it more in depth. Okay, 1 second. Okay.
Is it chapter 7?
Yeah, we're in chapter 7. It's on the board. It's blued out. It's on the share screen.
תודה רבה.
Okay.
Well, it's
Okay, so now,
interesting.
now
It's interesting that his dream is resembling previous dreams too. They're kind of very unusual and bizarre, actually. I really wonder why Daniel would now come with a dream.
Because he saw it. What do you mean why? This is what he saw. He didn't make it up. This is what he saw. Okay. Now, so everyone has the first one as Bavel. There isn't a lot of disagreement. The next one is the Persian Empire. Another one shows up. Dum Yeladov, like a bear, Lishtar Velistar Chadekamos, and it stood to one side. Uslas Ilah and Bapuma ben Shinain. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said to it, Kumi Yachulu Basar Shagi, get up and eat much meat. This is the Persian Empire, which, controlled it was the big, in many ways, a very big empire. And the 3 ribs stuck between its teeth are the 3 ribs the 3 steaks it couldn't swallow. So Rashi says this refers to the three Greek provinces in Asia Minor and the northern and southern Greek that he couldn't conquer. As you know, the Persians tried many times to defeat Greece, and in the end, the Greeks retained their independence. Now we come to now the
okay, so he sees different animals,
right, and the second one is about the the Persia. The bear is Persia. Now, the Malbim says a different interpretation in the 3 ribs. Very interesting one. That because the Persian Empire encompassed the territory of 3 empires: Assyria, Babylonia, and the Media, and then Paras and Mede, Persia and Media that they have themselves, which are 3 of the 4 sides of the world. And he goes on to say, the Malbim says a really interesting thing, that unlike Nebuchadnezzar, who first murdered and exterminated and destroyed, the Persians did not destroy everything. The ribs were between their teeth. They ate some of the meat, but not a lot. They only destroyed those who resisted them, but those who accepted their conquest and their rule, they're relatively benign, as the Jews, with the exception of Purim had a relatively benign experience under the Persians. So the Malbim says an amazing thing about the bear. What is the difference in the eating habits of a lion, Nebuchadnezzar, who conquered everyone, destroyed everyone, killed most of the people, and then, controlled what was left? What's the difference between the bear and the lion in its eating habits? It's a fascinating Malbim. Lions are pure carnivores. They only eat meat. Bears are omnivores. Bears will eat berries, they'll eat fish, they'll eat meat, they'll dig up your potatoes and eat them. Bears eat anything pretty much.
Special honey.
Honey, right? Yes, they like honey, they like berries. Bears are omnivorous. They're very good predators, they're very strong, but they don't just eat meat. So too, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, was about conquering, destroying, and completely imposing their will. The Persian Empire, sometimes they didn't eat the meat, which means to say the Persian Empire, if you submitted, were benign. As we see, Achashverosh sends messengers to 127 countries and 127 languages, in their languages, that the Persian Empire wanted obedience and taxes, but wasn't interested in crushing and destroying and remaking, unlike the Babylonians or the Romans. So that's another thing. But even though the Persians were not inclined to slaughter, when the prophet says, "Arise and eat much meat," when they conquered Bavel, they slaughtered everyone, the city of Bavel, all the royal family, and so on. And the reason being, because to punish Bavel for what it did to Jerusalem and to the Jewish people. So even though normally they were not so destructive, in the case of the destruction of Bavel, they were as if it were because of God's command.
A lot of these dreams that he's describing about these animals were actually gods in their beliefs. He's describing.
I'm not sure about the leopard with the wings, but the fact is that Daniel, the important thing to understand here is Daniel is speaking about things that didn't happen yet. All these kingdoms are far, far in the future, with the exception of Persia. But Rome and the Macedonian Empire are far, far in the future. Now the Barvanel. Now I'm going to riff for a little bit on the Barvanel. The Barvanel says one of the interesting things is, right, that all four creatures come out of the sea together, but they pass in front of Daniel in chronological order, one by one. So they all emerge from the sea together. But Barbanel says that we should look very careful at all the details. And Bavel conquered all those who came before it. Now, so he again with Bavel, he's pretty straightforward. And now we come to Persia. So the Barbanel also says that once the Persians conquered them, all the Babylonians fled. So that's the idea that I stand him on his legs. Instead of being the lion and the eagle, he's the scaredy cat who runs away. That they their self-confidence was completely broken and they all ran away. Okay. And he also says a very interesting thing, that a heart of man was given to them. He says that when there are moments in the life of an empire, of a power, where they imagine they're invincible, but but at some point they recognize that they're really no different than anyone else, and once they no longer believe in themselves, they collapse. So says Abarvanel. Now, the second animal is the bear. And it goes from side to side. Why does it move from one side and then to the other? If you see here, and it stood on one side because the Persian Empire, sometimes the Medes ran it, sometimes the Persians ran it. So it was as if it were moving from side to side. One moment. One moment. Okay. So some people say that the reference to the bear is Achashverosh, who it says a bear is unsettled. It's always pacing. The church is unsettled, constantly moving, as you know from the Purim story, from one extreme to the other. No.
Oh, where
We're up to the leopard now.
it's a mixture of animals, because where a dove lives, an aryeh doesn't live.
Right.
And you know, in Siberia, all we had is dubim. We had
Yeah, the polar bear.
no, we were not that far north. We had good sized bears. I don't remember now what color. Probably brownish, good size, but they had no enemies really.
You didn't see any Siberian tigers?
No.
Yeah, there is a Siberian
tigers.
tiger.
There were just dubim.
Right. So now, So now we get to the leopard. So the leopard, everyone agrees that the leopard is the empire of Alexander of Macedon, and we call it in the commentaries, we call it Malchus Yavam, the king of Greece, and that's because Macedonia is in what's today Bulgaria and northern Greece. It's in the Balkans. But Macedonia was considered a barbarian country by the Greeks, but they had adopted Greek culture. So when Alexander conquered half the world, he injected it with the Greek culture. So he's called the Greeks. And indeed, once he conquered Greece, he gathered all the Greeks together and was able to get them to work together. The Greek cities were always fighting each other. Alexander got them all together as one by conquering them and then went off to conquer the world. So Ba'asar Danach Hazei Havis, I saw another creature like a leopard. So the Malbim explains that the leopard is a very bold animal. It's smaller and weaker than the lion, but a leopard will jump into the middle of a pack of lions and steal their prey. A leopard will go into a troop of baboons much bigger than it and grab one and run away. Leopards are extremely brash. So too, Alexander Macedon, he has a minor empire somewhere in the Balkans, and he creates a military system and goes off to conquer the world and does. He's very brash. And V'lo gapin arba di uf al gabe, it had 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Alexander conquered a tremendous amount, but it had 4 heads.
All the way to India.
His kingdom fell apart into four kingdoms right after he died, and the 4 wings indicate his rulership to the 4 corners, the 4 directions of the compass, and
and one of them ended up close to Israel.
Yeah, well, the Syria and Egypt constantly fought over Israel. So,
well, okay. Later on, Rome conquered all of them.
Yeah, well, we're going to learn about that. And why does the leopard have 4 heads? None of the other creatures has more than 1 head. So Darius had conquered much of the world, the last Darius, and Alexander went to fight with him. And in the course of defeating the Persian army, he conquered the Persian Empire and Egypt and so on. And he very, very quickly conquered, because once the head of the Persian Empire fell, once the Persian Empire itself fell down, he was able to quickly put all of it under his rule. And he says, the bear moves slowly. The bear doesn't have wings because the Persian Empire conquered the places next to it. In other words, it had a big empire, then it expanded it slowly. Alexander went from Macedon to India. He went all over the world, basically conquering things, as I'll show you. Now, and about the four wings, you can watch how quickly he conquered everything. Watch this.
There's no sound. Is it okay?
I have sound. I guess you don't. Okay, just watch. You don't need to hear the sound. Look how quickly. Let me go back to the beginning of this. It's 336 BCE, right? Now watch. It's just 2 years after he becomes king.
Are we talking about Alexander?
Yeah, this is the leopard. Look, we're talking 6 years, and look how much he ruled.
Well, he ended up in India.
We're getting there. He's not there yet. He's already in Afghanistan. Look.
Very fast.
Yeah, in 10 years. It's basically in 10 years. Watch. So you see how quick. So that's the four wings. He spreads to the four corners of the world so quickly. That gives you an idea of how of how quickly he conquered. That's the leopard, and in conquering those places, he injected the Hellenic, the Greek culture into all those places. And here's the four heads. There we are. One moment. There goes. Okay. So this is the four heads of Daniel. As Abarvanel explains, the four kingdoms. So you see, this is the Indian Empire the party didn't conquer. This is the basically Persia and Western Asia. And this is the Syrian, the Antigonus, which later becomes the Seleucid Empire. This is the Ptolemies. This is the Egyptian part, and they constantly fought over Israel until the Seleucids finally won. And then the one general took over Greece, and then they slowly fought over that. But these are the four great kingdoms. This is the Indian Empire that bounced back after Alexander died. And remember, he did all of this between the age of 24 and 32, which is 22 and 32, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. Okay, now, So now we go back. And just a note, Saja Gaon has an interesting thing to say here. Now, the Malbim, what does he have to say about the leopard, about Yavan? Now we get to the most important one that affects us the most. Then I saw in the visions of the night. So here's the question. Malbim asks a very good question. It says here, afterwards I saw the visions of the night, right? But he already had a dream. When do you have a dream? And he was sleeping on his bed, right? So when do you have dreams? You sleep on the bed. Why does it say visions of the night? So the Malbim explains it doesn't mean that he saw a night vision. He saw visions of a night. The night was the dream. The dream was about a long and terrible night, the long, long exile that comes with all the suffering that comes after the Roman conquest of Israel. Because all the trouble and everything from then till now is all part of the rule and the destruction brought by the Roman Empire. So when he saw it, I saw a vision of the night. It means a vision of a night. In other words, of a terrible night. That's part of the vision. He sees a long and terrible, seemingly endless night. So the night is part of the vision, not a description, because we already know he was sleeping on his bed. And he saw Baruch, a fourth creature, very awesome and dreadful, which he didn't say about any of the other ones, very mighty, and it had huge iron teeth, and it ate and crushed and trampled the rest with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before and had 10 horns. It was different in its strength, in its nature, in its longevity. Now, Rabbi Saja Gaon lived at the beginning of the great Arab conquest, the first 200 years of the great Arab conquest. So Saja Gaon says, why does it say the Chaylev Amsani, awesome and dreadful and exceedingly strong? So he says that's a reference to after the Roman Empire falls, the Byzantine Empire falls, the Muslim Empire is also part of this. In other words, the rise of the Arab powers to conquering much of the world is in essence part of his vision of the Romans. In other words, to Rabbi Saja Gaon writing in the 9th century, Daniel's vision was both of the Roman millennium and then the Islamic millennium. And he says that's why he doubles the language. And he says that this is the expression that Achla and the rest he smashed with his feet. So the first refers to he ate and crushed. So the eating is the destruction, second temple. The crushed is the negation, the putting down of the Bar Kokhba revolt, and the stamping the rest with his feet is the oppression at the hands of the Romans, and then the church, and then the Islamic powers for the rest of exile. Now we get to where the commentaries sort of divide. What are the 10 horns? Right? The creature has 10 horns. What are these 10 horns? So we discussed last time that Rashi says the 10 kings of Rome who ruled until the destruction of the temple. But Abarvanel, of course, is very interested in this fourth creature. Now, Abarbanel says that you really can divide this into three things. One is the rise of Rome. The second is the judgment against them, and and then finally the fourth is the future rule of the Jewish people. So you see, of course, so first you have another horn, and the first plucked out. And I was looking to the throne he sat, and then the beast was slain and given to a flame of fire. And this is the ultimate destruction of Rome. And then, but we'll get to that later. But for now, we're describing the Rome and the 10 horns, the 10 horns. You got the Barbanel here.
So this was the only animal who could speak like a human being?
Only the horn. Now, there's a very interesting Ralbag, Rabbi Levi ben Gershonides, very interesting. So remember we say that most of the commentators say that the little horn that had eyes like human eyes and a mouth speaking arrogantly is Islam, right? Is Muhammad and his claims. The Ralbag, who lived in the same era, says no, that this little horn that makes the noise, he says this is a reference to Constantine, who made the Roman Empire adopt Christianity. In other words, and the idea is that it speak big things. It was a claim to speak for the Messiah. It has eyes like a person. In other words, it claims to fulfill the prophecies of the Torah, but really just made more trouble and disasters for the Jewish people. This Rabbi Levi ben Gershon explains at the Ralbag in 14th century. Right, and Jerusalem is destroyed during the. Rabbanel points out this 10 horns. Jerusalem is destroyed by the 10th Caesar, and he goes through them. And now the Barbanel says that was Ralbag. I want to tell you what I think about the little horn. And he says, I don't know why we would say the little horn is Constantine, because he was the is the I don't know why, he was a very major king. And he says that after Barvanel's very interesting, that after the Roman Empire fell, the Catholic Church was ruled by its popes, who was a little horn. He didn't have so much power, but nevertheless said big things and made great claims and got lots of people to follow them.
That's if anybody really wants to understand the origin of Christianity and what it really evolved, there's this terrific book called Constantine's Sword.
That's about the anti-Semitism that Christianity created. Yeah, it's a book I've read. My son, several of my sons have read it too. It's a long and hard book. I strongly recommend everyone read it.
It's very, really, if you want to understand where Christianity comes from and the havoc, especially against the Jews, and it was written by a Catholic priest.
Yeah. Very interesting. So he says, that it's a little horn without a lot of power, but with good eye, with eyes and the speech of a man. He says this is the very clever and devious way in which Christianity managed to win over all the kings and tribes of Europe and establish its power by convincing them that this was the truth, and convincing them this would be good for them. And it's because of this clever, devious way in which Christianity spread that it's the little horn with the big mouth. But as we'll see, other commentators see this as referencing to the rise of the Islamic Empire. So I'm going to talk now about the little horn pushing out the three horns. The Malbim actually is a very interesting approach. So so he says that that if you look at the Ishmaelites, at the Arabs, so the Malbim says, you see that they divided into different into different warring factions, in particular the Shiites and the Sunnis. He doesn't mention them by name. So he says the idea of the three horns being uprooted that he talks about over here, three of the first are plucked out before it, is a reference to the weakening of the church and the rise of the Protestant and secular governments in Europe. Now, and this is the idea so according to him, he says that it's a small horn because Muhammad began with just a few men, and ultimately, he made big claims, And the three horns plucked out are because he conquered what had been the Byzantine Empire, what had been the Persian Empire, and what had been and Spain. That the Islamic Empire conquered, and ultimately Islam conquered all the way through India. They ruled India for a while. So he says that this began small and made big claims, and ultimately conquered half the world. So it's a reference to the Ishmaelites, to Islam. So and that is some of the other commentaries make a similar claim. Find you the big mouth. Okay. Yeah, and the Rabbi Saadia Gaon, writing in the 9th century, also says that this is the rule of the Ishmaelites, the conquest of the conquest of the Persian Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire and Spain by the forces of Islam. So what's interesting is that there are at least 4 commentaries separated by a full 900 years, who all see the little horn with the big mouth as referring to to Islam that supplanted so many of the Christian and pagan empires. And it's very, very interesting. It's very interesting because we're talking, normally the book of Daniel, people see different things in it at different times. But here it's consistent for 1,000 years that this is the rule of Islam, and and indeed that the final struggle and the final creature is this horn.
Rabbi, to me, it doesn't really make that much sense. I think it's not just about Arabs. I think it's the whole story, starting all the way from Alexander, then the 4 generals, then Rome takes over all of what these 4 generals or Alexander had, and then it goes back all the way what Rome took over.
Correct.
And then Christianity, and then Islam.
But the little horn that pushes away the 3 big horns is the Islamic Empire that got rid that conquered all these very different empires: the Persian Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and much of Southern and Western Europe.
Right.
So this
one
and more than that, and they at the moment they remain the most significant adversary to Hashem and His people.
Right, till this day,
until the end of days. And Chazli, now we're going to read a part we have not read yet, but since we're now, what happens to the fourth creature, including the little horn with the big mouth? So that we'll read about Be'ezus Hashem in 2 weeks. Next week, I shall not be here. I will be away next week, so we're going to study in 2 weeks. An email will go out. Thank you all for coming. And we see what happens to the
Rabbi.
Big scary creature.
Thank you.
Next week.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting, a little bizarre.
It's meant to be bizarre. It's Yossele. It's meant to make you think. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts when you return in 2 weeks.
Yes.
And it makes me laugh and makes me cry.
It's just like a symphony.
Yeah. Or an
emotions
opera.
right.
Well, by the way, you should know that some say, even though the Medrash says it's the 10 kings, some say that these are the 10 powers that rise after the fall of the Roman Empire, out of the Roman Empire. And exactly who the horns that fall out, what these 10 horns are. A matter of great discussion. But the fact is that until this day, Western civilization is built on Rome, and the power of the alternate civilization of the Islamic world is built on the little horn, on Muhammad. And frankly, those two worlds have been in struggle: the world of Rome, which also becomes the world of Christianity, and the Muslim world, and the Yiddlach are stuck in the middle, right? What was the Alter Rebbe, what was Rav Shneur Zalman of Leadi accused of when they arrested him? He was sending money to the Sultan in Turkey, right? Because the Russians are fighting with the Turks and so on.
Rabbi,
By the way,
there
are other visions Daniel has later that the Malbim and others see as referring to later kingdoms, such as the Ottomans, such as the various European empires. But we'll get there.
I think that the underlying point here is all that history is basically to tell our part in it, what happened to us for all of these kingdoms,
yeah, but
empires.
But that ultimately all these kingdoms will disappear and the Jewish people will remain
Ultimately,
and will ultimately come
we
to.
know ultimately. In the meantime, we're paying the price.
We're not arguing. That's why it was terrible and scary and a long night. Again, the vision is of the night, not of a night vision, because we know that already. It's a vision of a long and terrible night. Yes, there's no question.
Right.
Okay, we shall continue Be'ezus Hashem in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone. Look out for your emails for the exact schedule.